What's up, guys? Welcome to today's video where I'm going to help you solve a problem that tons of kayak fishermen misdiagnose as my kayak doesn't track well. All right, so listen, I'm involved in a lot of forums and groups and pages where I see anglers talk about various kayaks that don't track well all the time. And generally when I engage them in conversation, I say, what do you mean it doesn't track well? Oh, well, when I'm fishing and I paddle up to a spot and I set my rod down and I go to cast, my nose starts to turn on me. That's actually not tracking. Tracking is simply when you're paddling, that boat wants to track. There's a couple of reasons tracking can be bad that I'll talk about in the how to paddle a fishing kayak video, so be sure to click on the link in the description box for that video. But I want to talk about today how to balance your kayak properly and a couple of small things that you might not think about that are affecting not only the performance of your kayak, but your experience while out on the water. So let's head over to the kayak and let me show you a couple of simple ones right out of the gate. All right, guys, so I'm going to do the best I can to cover all the factors that can make you think your kayak's drifting and not tracking properly, going from pretty much the easiest stuff all the way up to some of the worst things, which means you might even have to have your kayak replaced. So bear with me as I discuss the easiest up to the worst. So first and foremost, with these modern fishing kayaks where you can adjust the seat, you can easily get that seat cockeyed, out of balance like so. And if you have that seat cockeyed, then the boat's going to want to turn on you. So first and foremost, you want to make sure that your seat is even. Now on some kayaks, and admittedly BONAFIDE being one of the worst offenders, you can even have side-to-side slop in your seat. So for example, on the PWR 129, on the ends of the seat post, we actually got 3dyak.com to make spacers to take up that space so that the seat's never off to the center, which is going to make you think you have a performance problem. All right, so once you know that your seat is not cockeyed and you make sure that your seat back is not adjusted more on one side than the other, and trust me when I tell you, a cockeyed seat back is going to make you twist, which is going to make the boat be out of balance. We'll talk about that more when we get out on the water. Then the next thing you want to do is you want to check your load. Now, the first thing that I recommend people to do when they say that my boat doesn't track right, and I know it's a boat that does really well, or if they say it always wants to turn to the right on me, I pretty much can guarantee you that there's some out of balance situation on your fishing kayak. So the easiest way to diagnose the problem is to simply take a rod, tie it to the back of your boat. You can do this with a piece of rope, but the rope will even create drag on the boat, which can create an artificial response. So get your boat centered, make sure that you've got plenty of clearance, and then just push the boat. And if you push the boat and it doesn't turn without you in it, or if it turns slightly to one direction or the other, then you know that you've got a boat that's out of balance and it's not your seating position. Now, we're gonna pull that back in. We're gonna try it one more time because I wanna make sure that I'm getting the point across that you can still have a seat that's out of balance, but you wanna make sure that you don't have like something inside the hull, an anchor, some significant weight thing that is gonna cause that boat to feel like it's always turning to one side when it has nothing to do with the actual hull. So I'm gonna take this boat, I'm gonna get rid of all the drift, and then I'm just gonna push it out like so. And if you notice, the boat is starting to turn slightly to the right. Now with this fishing kayak, I kind of expect that. And the reason being is I have two anchor wizards on it, and both of those anchor wizards are actually off to one side. So what I can do is I can compensate for that with my batteries, my body weight, where I put my gear, or other factors to make sure that that doesn't become an issue long term. So I'm gonna set this rod to the side over here. Then we're gonna jump in the boat. I'm gonna demonstrate how some of these things can be a problem that's easy to solve. And one of those things that I think a lot of anglers, even advanced anglers, have a tendency to overlook. So I'm gonna show you a little quick test when you first get into the fishing kayak that'll make this easy to determine. All right, so what you wanna do is you wanna get your boat in a stationary position. You wanna take out all the drag or the drift, and you wanna make sure that you've got the thing adjusted for what you think is perfect. Now, I know this is gonna seem a little foo-foo, a little hippie, but what you do is you take your hands and put them out to your side, turn your palms up, and look straight up. And if you feel yourself compensating, you've got an out of balance boat. I'm gonna pull back up a little bit closer to you guys and demonstrate that one more time. So you can even do this to a certain extent with your nose wedged on the bank for a little bit of extra security, because it's still going to identify the issue. It's way better if you're not sitting on the bank. So I'm gonna back off and show you what I mean. So I'm setting my paddle down. I'm not drifting, my nose isn't turning. So I'm gonna simply take my palms, put them up to the sky, put them above your ears, then close your eyes and look up. Now, I'm gonna show you something. I'm gonna scoot off to one side just a tiny bit, just the tiniest bit, and that is obvious because you can see it. Now you're naturally gonna correct that, but I've even seen anglers that don't correct that, and then what's gonna happen is, now that boat's gonna wanna turn that. See, even with no momentum, the boat's wanting to turn the direction that I'm leaning. But watch me demonstrate this example with me sitting in the boat. I'm gonna put my palms up. So you naturally cannot balance with your eyes closed and your hands up to the sky if you're out of balance. So I'm gonna do that one more time and show you what I'm talking about. And trust me, if you take this test and you don't cheat, you'll identify that you have an out of balance boat problem. So palms up above your ear holes to the sky, close your eyes and look up. And so I'm naturally trying to compensate for that off-centered weight when I get off to the same side. So first trick is the push test. If your boat turns, you know it's out of balance and it's not the boat. Now there is one instance where that is a problem. That is the worst problem, and I'll talk about that now instead of making you wait to the end. If you push your boat and you've got the load balanced and it still wants to turn, the next thing you need to do is strip the boat down naked. And I know this seems like a lot of work, but it's gonna save you a ton of frustration on the water. Strip the boat down completely naked, make sure there's nothing inside of it, and do the push test all over again. If you push test the boat while it's completely empty and your seat is centered, you could actually strip the seat out as well just to make sure that that's not a problem. You likely have a warped hull. If you have a warped hull where you've tightened the boat down more in the front than you have in the back and it's caused the keel to be twisted, the boat is never going to track straight, and every time you stop paddling, it's going to want to turn to that direction. So first and foremost, if you have a naked boat, do the push test naked first, and you'll at least eliminate that out of the way. But that is your worst case scenario, which means you likely are going to have either have corrective measures done to your hull, which we'll talk about in a future video, or you're going to have to get that hull replaced if it's still under warranty, because that crooked keel is going to make that boat constantly turn. By and large, it's probably going to be one of the things that we're discussing here. Now, here's the next biggest offender. We have a tendency to put a lot of stuff behind us. We also have a tendency to be one hand dominant or the other, which means we turn in the same direction all the time, okay? I'll give you an example. Even if I'm getting rod holders out of this side, on the left-hand side of my boat, I'll actually turn to the right and grab them because I'm more comfortable turning to the right for whatever reason. And I think if you pay attention to what you do on the water, you'll realize that you're also the same way. Now, I'm gonna demonstrate this. When I turn back, I naturally have a tendency to over scoot to that inside from the direction that I turn from. The other thing that can happen is that every time you turn, you could turn the seat frame, or you could loosen the seat back up on one side, and when the seat back is crooked, that means that that side of your hip is going to be crooked and your upper body weight is going to be off to one side and you're going to lean, which is going to make the boat want to turn that direction, right? So you always want to make sure you're mindful is if you start to experience it, stop, palms up, close your eyes, and you'll realize that you have a little bit of an out of balance situation. Probably just need to scoot your butt over a little bit, bada boom, bada bing, problem solved. But the next thing is to make sure that your seat back is nice and vertical, okay? And to make sure that it's not tighter on one side than it is on the other. That right there is probably the biggest issue that I see. When I see somebody say, man, especially if I'm having the opportunity to fish with them and they go, man, this boat wants to turn to the right every time I pick up the rod. I say, stop fishing for a second. I paddle over, I look at their boat, one seat strap's long, one seat strap's short, their seat's cockeyed, and it's because they've naturally turned that same direction over and over again, so their seat is kind of somewhat crept in that direction. So once you know your seat back is right, once you know that your seat is centered and it's not cockeyed, and you know that you don't have an out of balance situation in your boat, by and large, you're not gonna run into any issues with quote unquote tracking. Now, I do wanna show you what tracking really is, and I'm gonna have to back up a little bit and paddle towards you to show you what I'm talking about, and then we'll jump into some ways that you can manage boat position low to no cost. Now, another major issue that I see with the definition of tracking, which is going to make your experience problematic, is how people paddle. With high seats, we have a tendency to go longer than we should with the paddle. So when you're paddling properly, you should be going as vertical down the boat as you possibly can, right down the edges, okay? And if you're doing that, that boat's gonna track nice and smooth. But if you start to paddle out wide, you see how it's gonna swing my nose left to right? And then if I stop to pick up my rod, I'm already turning in that direction. So if you paddle incorrectly, you're gonna think that the boat doesn't track correctly. And then what's gonna happen is you're gonna compensate for that and you're gonna get frustrated. So little things like not having the handle of my knob sticking out in my way so that I don't naturally compensate by paddling wide will get rid of that tendency. So I'm gonna back up and I'm gonna show you what I mean. One of the things that you can also do is arrest your drift before you start fishing. And this is an issue that I see happen quite a bit with kayak anglers. So I'm gonna get the boat stopped. I'm gonna start paddling. I'm paddling vertical. And as I'm coming into my target, I wanna start to decrease my speed. And so that the way you do that is to drag your paddle on one side, drag your paddle on the other side and kind of tiptoe or reverse pedal in a pedal drive kayak. But what you wanna do is get rid of your resultant movement and then maybe create a little bit of drag on the side you wanna turn to, but then take it back out with a nice scull so that your boat doesn't want to continue to turn. If your boat's turning when you put your paddle down, it's going to continue to turn even worse when you put it away. So if you get rid of the drift or the turn before you stop, then you won't introduce extra drift or turn into the boat. Now, I'm gonna show you another thing that I see as a common problem. You're paddling to your fishing spot. You're almost there. You turn around to get your rod, and when you turn around to get your rod, you introduce a turn. So now when you introduce that turn, you're naturally gonna turn back around, and now your boat's turning this way, and you're frustrated because this boat doesn't track well. It's not that the boat doesn't track well, it's that you're introducing the turn into the boat. So I'm gonna demonstrate that for you guys one time, and a lot of folks are gonna have that light bulb come on and go, oh, dude, that's exactly what I do. So you're paddling into your fishing spot. You stop paddling. This boat's going nice and straight. Okay, now I turn to get my rod and notice that the boat starts to turn. When I turn back around, it's turning, and now I'm thinking this boat doesn't track well. So again, what you want to do is you want to arrest that movement before you start to pivot or turn, so that way when you turn around to grab your rod and you turn back around, that nose is sitting right where you want it to, like a pointer that's pointing at a bird. So now I'm gonna show you a couple of little pro tips to help with drift. Some of you guys ain't gonna like this because it's gonna require you getting your feet wet. And I do hear a lot of kayak anglers go, ew, I'm getting my feet wet. It's a water sport. So if you don't wanna get your feet wet, maybe pick up golf or basketball or pickleball, or, well, I guess if you sweat, I don't know. It's a water sport, so this little tip, you can take it or leave it. So here's my last little tip for boat control. If I'm heading into a spot, and I know that when I get there, I don't want to be casting directly off the nose, and I want to grab my rod and I want to get ready to fish pretty fast, one of the things I like to do is to use my foot to create drag. Stick my foot in the water, it's naturally going to create some drag that way, and it's going to slow me down. I turn to pick up my rod, and when I go to make a cast, I'm now casting so that when I set the hook, I'm broadside to the fish, or at least 45 off, so that I don't set the hook and I'm going straight at the fish when I set the hook, because your hull is most efficient in the forward and aft dynamic. That fish is most efficient coming at you. So if you're coming at it and it's coming at you, you're gonna run out of room. That fish is gonna jump, shake the lure, and you're gonna lose the fish. Blame it on the kayak or blame it on your rod or blame it on yourself, when truly all you had to do is introduce a little bit of a turn so that you're casting at an off angle, so that when you set the hook, you've got that resistance of that hull not wanting to turn in that direction. And if it starts to pull your nose around, just stick that other foot in the water, point your toe, and create drag to where you don't have to fight the fish, and you don't have to pick up your paddle, you don't have to pedal. So using your feet as drag for managing boat position, getting rid of wind drift and things like that will go a long ways to reducing frustration. Now, the thing that you can't prevent is called weather vaning, which means the wind wants to catch you and turn the boat in the direction of the wind, like a weather vane. So you sticking up, your rod sticking up, and all that stuff create a weather vane. Now, ways to compensate for that are things like anchor wizards, power poles, rudders. And so those are all boat management position things that you can accomplish. But to identify if you have a tracking problem or if you're sitting crooked in the boat, do these few tips. And trust me when I tell you, it will reduce your frustration on the water. It will make you love your watercraft that much more, and it'll make you more efficient when it comes to catching fish. I'll tell you straight up, guys, I've actually seen folks sail a kayak because they got so frustrated, and then after speaking to me, they said to themselves, wow, I probably didn't have a problem after all, because I thought I was having the same problem with my new fishing kayak. So they actually sold a fishing kayak for the wrong reason. So make sure your seat's centered, make sure it's not cockeyed, make sure you don't have a weight imbalance, and if you do, compensate for it. Strip your boat down naked and do the push test to make sure you don't have a warped hull, and make sure your seat back is vertical and it's not adjusted improperly. And I think you'll have a lot better experience on the water. Pay attention to how many times you turn in one direction, and so that you don't end up scooted off to one side. And trust me when I tell you, you'll get way more pleasure out of your watercraft and your time out on the water. So guys, do me a favor, hit up that comment section, let me know if this video was helpful. And if it was, hit that subscribe button and watch one of these other videos up here hovering over your head.